Saya, Ben, hey, congratulations on your new documentary, Plastic People.
Thank you so
Thank you very
much.
much.
More of a congratulations is being showcased at South by Southwest. How do you folks feel about that?
Ben, do you want to take that?
Sure. I mean, South by Southwest is probably my top choice for a festival for a premiere like this. I've been to quite a few festivals, never this one. Always wanted to go. Tons of friends have been there and all the different, for the music or for the film, and heard nothing but good things. And we have a bit of a some Texas content in our film too. So there's an added bonus, and some of the people in the film are going to be at the Q&A at our screenings. So that's an exciting little bonus as well.
Excellent, excellent. So let's ask that obligatory question: is what actually sparked you two to make this documentary in the first place?
Well, we came at it in different
Oh,
ways, but Zaya should probably start this one because she was involved first, and then I came on. But go ahead, Zaya.
sure. Well, I know the executive producer of the film that you see in the film. His name is Rick Smith, and he wrote a book quite a few years ago that launched at South by Southwest, actually called "Slow Death by Rubber Duck," where he was testing all these sort of chemicals, things like in your shampoo and all that sort of stuff, on the human body, on his own body. So a few years ago, he actually wrote an article, an op-ed in the Globe and Mail, and it was all about him testing his own feces for the first time for microplastics. So the executive producers of White Pine Pictures came to him. He and I had just done another plastics project, maybe a year or two before then, and he called me up because I've interviewed him in the past and we worked together on this. And he said, Zaya, how would you feel about being the first person on film ever to test your poo for microplastics? And I guess it was something I could not turn down. So that's how I got involved in this project.
And then
Okay.
maybe, I don't know, maybe 6 months later, I was approached and met all the producers and Zaya and was very impressed with all of them. Helped write a proposal. Zaya and I actually worked on that together, a little a teaser trailer kind of thing to raise the money. I remember thinking, maybe 50-50 chance they raise the money for this. Microplastics were totally new back then, but then I think maybe 6 months after that, got the phone call. We've got the budget. Let's go. So
Yeah.
we jumped on it.
I'm afraid to ask, but Zaya, what was the result of your poop?
Oh, well, I can't tell you too much because I want people to watch the film. But at some point, yeah, like there's a lot of stuff that goes behind the scenes as a filmmaker. And I'll tell you that having to do that as a sample test was one of the more personal things that I've had to do. But I will tell you, we did find plastic in my samples. The strange thing is seeing it on camera, and the really strange thing to stomach in a way, quite literally, is the fact that you've got other people's garbage in your body, and seeing other people's garbage floating around in your system is really quite shocking. So that's just one of the aspects that's really eye-opening in this film.
Now, before I proceed further, the subject really is microplastics inside our body, and I want to say some people are starting to read about it in the news today. But for those people who aren't familiar, how do you define microplastics?
So microplastics are any plastics that are smaller than 5 millimeter in size. And anything smaller than a micron becomes a nanoplastic. So if you think about something about smaller than the size of an eraser head, that's about the size of a microplastic. And you got to keep in mind all the plastic that we have ever made as human beings is still on Earth. That's about 10 Mount Everest's worth of plastic, if you can visualize that, 10 billion tons. And none of it has gone anywhere. It's all still here on Earth, and most of it is just shredding down into these tiny invisible shards that we're eating, drinking, and breathing all the time. And in fact, you and I at this very moment are breathing in microplastics, and everybody who's watching this right now is too.
So how do you want to create a narrative that basically informs us about microplastics without sounding like an alarmist? Or is that what you're going for?
Well,
Ben?
it's tricky. It's tricky. I mean, the idea starting out was that it would be framed by Zaya's kind of journey to first discover the microplastics in her environment and sort of point out where they are, which is everywhere, and then to go looking for them inside of her body and other people's bodies, and then adding on to that, looking into like the latest sort of science about whether or not we should be concerned about having microplastics in our body. So that's basically one sort of storyline that works out almost like a little adventure story. We go all over the world doing that. And then we also kind of, as a subtext, look into how we got into the situation in the first place, how humanity basically became addicted to plastic. More than addicted, you know, plastic essentially built the modern world. And we have elements of that storyline too, and I think they complement each other pretty well. That was the idea, and hopefully it's working. And then we played around with the visuals quite a bit, plasticky kind of visuals. There's a lot of archival material used in a somewhat playful way. So I think it's a watchable, doomy kind of story. And then of course it is a solvable problem. So there are sort of solutions and ways that we could approach it in the film as well.
Now, of course, you went all around the world looking for your subjects. So why did you went with this approach? Because I know documentaries are already hard to make, but you guys searched worldwide for your subjects. And how did you convince them to be part of this project?
That's a really good question. You know, there were certain aspects of the film that we felt that we had to cover. So being in Paris, for example, and speaking with the Rwandan minister who led, you know, all the world's initiatives right now to stop plastic, we had to show that. We also really wanted to travel to places in the global south, right? Usually this conversation is taking place in the global north where people are making the plastic. What's happening to all the people who are having all that plastic sent over and exported to them? So we also wanted to go to Manila and wanted to see, you know, what is it like for a place that is a quote unquote developing nation, and how are they dealing with the plastic burden that they have? So that became really important. And a lot of the other stories, we had to chase the latest science, because for me, I worked on a show called Daily Planet for a decade, and it was a daily show. So I could tell you what that was happening that day in the science. But for a film, you have to plan for a year in advance, right? And you're right, you have to get in and earn the trust of the scientists that you're working with. And I have to be honest, some of them didn't want to share what they had found yet. So, you know, finding the right scientists, talking to the best scientists meant that we had to go where they were. So there were certain places where we just had to beg our executive producers to open their pocketbooks again, because we were like, we have to go here. Please send us here because we have to follow the story.
Yeah, and sometimes we had to be flexible. Sometimes it didn't work out here. Like a study wasn't published on time, and they said, "Oh no, you can't use the footage anymore." So we had to go somewhere else. And you know, sometimes the people who did the study were only in one place because a lot of this is new. This is sort of a new field, a relatively new field. So, for instance, the Italian scientist in the film was a late addition because something else didn't work out, and everyone seems to love his take on things in his study. So yeah, so sometimes you have to be a little bit flexible in the documentary way.
Yes, absolutely. Now, in the sense, this seems like a uphill battle in its own way, because you know, plastics is there's just too much money involved, and it's too convenient. And so what are you hoping, you know, like a film like this would actually do?
I'll do a short answer to that, and Zaya has I'm sure, a longer and probably better answer. But for me, a film like this, someone says in the film, you know, and this is what we can do, is, you know, knowledge is power. And I think a lot of people don't really know the scale of what's going on, that, you know, that this stuff is basically like indestructible and never goes away. And I don't think a lot of people know just how much plastic we make every year. And I don't think a lot of people know how much of that plastic that we make is used for just single use, you know, use it for 30 seconds. Like the most indestructible material on earth, a miracle material, you use your spoon for 20 seconds, throw it away, it like lives forever, or whatever, doesn't live, but it exists forever. Um, so the more people that know that, you know, probably the better, even though you're right, things are definitely trending in the wrong direction. And there's a lot of like infrastructure being built, and it's very, very cheap to make, and it makes a lot of money. It's extremely profitable. Um, but I think once enough people get to know this, it's actually relatively simple to reduce your the amount of single-use plastic. I would start with single-use plastic personally and make that the kind of sort of target. Um, and it's possible. That's another uplifting thing about it. You know, when we grew up in the 80s and the 90s, you know, like when I grew up in the 80s and the 90s, most, you know, cans of beverages were glass or aluminum. And most of the things in the grocery store were glass, like a pickle jar was glass. Like all that drift into more and more plastic is pretty recent. And I don't see why it couldn't go back. But maybe that's my simple take on things. So yeah, that's what I think.
Well, I think definitely, one of the key moments in the film is where you see that people were trained to use disposable items, trained to throw out their coffee cups, right? And they were resistant to it in the beginning. People didn't want to, oh, Ben, thank God you aren't using a disposable cup in the
Oh,
drink.
not
No,
disposable.
I'm
Stop.
so joking.
I quit.
But yeah, see, Ben didn't get trained. And so he's a resistor. And I think
I
many of us,
was trained. I've gone back. Like I
yeah,
used to.
you've gone
I'm
back.
like I've got. Yeah, I mean, a lot of people like I didn't use a lot of plastic. I'm sure I'm very like a lot of people. You know, like I thought, oh yeah, I shouldn't use too much plastic, but would. But even from there, I've reduced it quite a bit. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah. No, no worries. And so, there are things that we can do. I've already thrown out my plastic chopping board. I threw out my frying pan. I won't throw everything out because I don't want to throw things out that I don't need to throw out. But certain things that I've come to realize are actually toxic, I did get rid of. But I think the other key thing, the big picture thing, is that we were very strategic in making this film. We're making it right in the middle of the most important treaty, global treaty with all the countries around the world involved. This is the Plastics Treaty. It's taking place right now. And the INC4 is going to be in the next couple months. And the negotiations are going to be taking place until 2025. So we did this and we created an impact campaign, which is at our website for the film, plasticpeopledoc.com, and it's got a take action site. So what we did was we involved all these NGOs, some of the biggest NGOs on the planet, WWF International, we've got Friends of the Earth, we've got Environmental Defense, we've got Plastic Pollution Coalition, a whole bunch more. And all these people have joined together because they're all fighting the fight against plastic too. So we want people to be able to get involved, whether it's at the local, national, international level, whether you want to do citizen action, whether you want to start suing people with your friends, you know what I mean? So we really want to get people to start joining communities that have already been formed. There's a lot of people doing great work and we want to direct them to them.
And just another little note too that we also took, care to try not to sort of blame the average person or to make the average person feel guilty. Like the world is structured for this type of consumption. And it's not your fault if like every once in a while you like had to drink a plastic bottle of water or you did, or it's not about blaming individual people. It's about empowering people and getting the sort of knowledge out there.
Well, it's going to be a tough habit to break, especially if the plastics are in our clothing or in our carpet, as indicated, and that's going to be a hard trend. But who knows? Because corporations try to kill the electric car, and look where we're at now, right?
There you go. And I would keep banging this home. Start with the single use stuff. That's a good place to start. Like for anybody who wonders how they can, make a bit of an impact. It really is the most egregious part of it. And probably the easiest thing to sort of remedy, the least necessary.
Excellent. So what's up next after Plastic People for the both of you?
We haven't even talked about that between ourselves, basically. We're still pretty busy with Plastic People. It has
Yeah.
2 Canadian broadcasters, and we're working on the shorter version of it for the other Canadian broadcaster. So I'll basically be busy on it until the end of April-ish, and then all the usual potential gigs and things that I'm working on and gonna start pitching. And yeah, that's my world.
Oh, me? I am an author behind the scenes as well. So I have a new book that I am starting on. So that's
I didn't even know that. I didn't even know that.
yeah,
Learn
yeah,
something new
yeah,
every day.
yeah. So
There we go. There we go. Well, let me wrap it up with one last question. As audiences have a chance to watch this by Southwest, and then more audiences, hopefully down the world and all around the world, hopefully. What is the one most important take you hope they walk away with when they after watching your film?
Ben,
I guess I would sort of stick with what we've been saying that like we need it's probably or it is definitely essential that we reduce the amount of plastic that we use and make. I mean, I would keep it that simple. However, that happens, there are avenues to pursue that, personal ones and sort of bigger, more structural ones. And that's the one that I think about all the time after spending a year thinking about this. And then further down the road, there'll be room for like more innovative solutions that are all kind of sort of coming online. People are making new kinds of plastic, new ways of recycling. Recycling doesn't work super well. I'm not. We've debated this. We're not saying not to recycle, but it definitely isn't up to the problem. So yeah, so reduce the amount of plastic, especially the unnecessary stuff. It's not that hard.
yeah, and just to follow from what Ben is saying, there's one moment in the film where our one of our lead scientists, Sadat, says, "We're poisoning ourselves with our own hand. We are literally, we knowingly poisoning ourselves. If we know that to be the case, then why would we not change?" And we have the solutions. Like my whole thing is like, what would my grandma do? Every single one of us had a grandmother, or maybe the younger Gen Alphas would be great grandparents, but like my grandma did not have plastic and she was fine. She lived a completely fine life. Nothing in her kitchen was really plastic. And so we can do it. It's not one of those really like big rocket science problems that we need to solve. We just need to live like our grandparents did, and we'll be just fine.
And you could take it one step further. You could start with living the way we did when we were kids,
Yeah.
right? That would be a massive reduction. Like 50% of all the plastic ever made has been made in the last 20 years, right? And so many more things are made out of plastic, especially the single-use disposable stuff. So if the world was just the way it was in 1992 when you were going to the 7-Eleven or
Bring back the 80s.
had a Snapple in a glass can or a glass container, not plastic, right? I don't know if everybody remembers that. It'd be a huge step in the right direction. It would probably reduce everything by about 30%. So yeah, go back to the early 90s. You like
80s.
the music better anyway. Or the 80s.
Well, the old ways sometimes surely work. So, folks, thank you very much for bringing
Thanks so
this
much.
documentary. It is an eye opener, and hopefully, it opens many, many more eyes around the world. Thank you very much for carrying this conversation with us. Appreciate
Thank
it.
Thank you
you.
so much, Gig.